At last, for wandering Wallsend, it's the green grass of home. 3 years ago, the Breakers, NSL Good Samaritans, took the Red Devils in, letting the State League Second Division club use Mitre 10 Stadium for home games. But in a few weeks, the merger will be official.
We're offering them a home and a good future, and Wallsend is over 104 years old, and we think that history should be maintained.
And in return, the Breakers get a ready-made talent squad.
Gives us a chance in the wintertime to eventually get them back into the First Division and to use some of our local players to bring them into the Breakers in the summertime as the years go on.
Meanwhile, it's been announced that Newcastle will host a match between Brazil and the Young Socceroos on December 11th. And in February, the Breakers will play a Trans-Tasman Challenge against New Zealand team Wellington. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
Since the 1980s, there have been calls by Armidale City Council for the boundaries between it and Jumerick Shire to be merged. But Jumerick has rejected outright any suggestions of amalgamation or boundary changes. This latest bid to resolve the dispute is a joint committee which looks at planning issues which affect both councils and the future growth of the city. Today, the committee met for the first time under the leadership of Independent Chairman Professor Ron Gates.
The idea essentially is that the representatives of the two councils should get together and discuss matters of common interest, things that concern them both, and try and work out what might be done about them.
Boundaries Committee Chairman Dan Kelly also attended the meeting. He believes the pioneering cooperative move is essential for councils as we move into the next century.
Well, I think a new understanding is essential between all councils in New South Wales now, because interests start to go over the mere physical boundaries, and it's important that councils get together and look at the issues as they affect the people.
The two thieves burst into the Shell service station in Thomas Street just after 1 a.m. Neither made any effort to hide his identity. The videotape is damaged, but in slow motion, the security camera shows one of the men pointing a pistol at the attendant's head. The terrified man is then ordered to empty the contents of the till into a plastic bag.
The other chap at the counter at this stage grabbed the money, and as they were walking out the door, the other chap with the gun grabbed a box of chocolates and away they went.
A young couple were also threatened. As they tried to drive away, one of the men brandished the gun, yelling at them to get out. Witnesses say the pair walked calmly from the scene of the crime. Police have released a description of the offenders. Both were in their mid-20s. The gunman is about 180 centimetres tall, with a medium build and dark collar-length hair. He was wearing a dark grey drill shirt and grey shorts. His companion is about 178 centimetres tall, with long brown hair tied in a ponytail. Last seen wearing dark jeans with a bandana tied around his head. And another hold-up, this time at the Westpac Bank in Hunter Street West around 3 this afternoon. Bank customers became wary when a suspicious-looking person approached the counter.
It came sort of beside me and did some writing, and then I went over to the teller. I said to the teller, "Watch out for that there." And by that time she started to get his fork out.
The bandit threatened the teller, grabbed a sum of money and was chased down Hunter Street by a bank customer and workers from a nearby pub. Police arrived and detained a Sydney man. He's being interviewed by detectives. All the money was retrieved. Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
A study into the 680-hectare site has presented Lake Macquarie Council with two options. One is the partial development of the site, rezoning some of the land for industrial and residential use. The other is total conservation, with the council acquiring the land and maintaining it as a nature reserve. The Jules Landcare Group is lobbying for the second option.
We don't want the land to be zoned so that residential development takes place or industrial development takes place on some of the land.
Residents fear development of the land will not only kill off wildlife, but also jeopardise its future as a wetland park.
It won't be anywhere near as good, it won't be anywhere near as of benefit to the people of Newcastle as it could be otherwise.
The group has called a public meeting tonight to lobby the council. A decision on the park's future will be made next year. Matthew White, NBN News.
For Dr. Owen James, this is one of the strangest house calls he's ever made. Passing through Newvale Colliery's gates, locked by Pacific Power, Dr. James travelled 600 metres into the mine to inspect the conditions of the protesters fighting the state operations closure and cutbacks at nearby Awabba. An hour later, he returned to the surface with some concerns.
Whilst there is no immediate danger, this sort of deprivation and strange environment that they're finding themselves in is not doing them the world of good.
Not doing them the world of good physically or mentally?
Well, it's both, isn't it?
While the doctor examined the workers, the miners' union was feeling the political pulse in Macquarie Street as officials pushed for an inquiry into the cutbacks. Union officials have been meeting in Sydney this afternoon with opposition and independent MPs to bolster calls for a parliamentary inquiry. A spokesman for opposition leader Bob Carr says that by the end of today's sitting, the combined ALP independent vote will see that inquiry become reality. The passing of the motion for an inquiry into the mine's closure brings with it the news those fighting to save 200 jobs have been waiting for. Newvale will remain open until the findings of the parliamentary committee are known. But a spokesman for Energy Minister Gary West says Newvale can't stay open forever because it has no contracts. Ron Land from the union said late this afternoon that he was still waiting for confirmation of what's been happening in Parliament, and until then,
we're going to bat on.
Scott Bevan, NBN News. For 8 days, these families hadn't seen their fathers and husbands who were sitting defiantly deep in the earth. But it was the last 10 minutes before the 9 miners resurfaced that were the hardest for the loved ones.
Very anxious.
Excited and happy.
We've been up since 4 o'clock this morning putting up balloons and streamers and we have open house this afternoon.
At last, the cable pulling the men out of the mine began to move, and then, minutes later, a muffled song of joy was heard, rising from the darkness. The protesters' eyes filled with tears at the sight of their families and the first rays of sunshine in 188 hours.
It's all too much, you know. I'll just have to let things soak into me, like the sun, let the sun soak into me.
And all were feeling the marathon protest had been worth it.
I think we've put the government back on its heels, you know, and that they just can't treat us like, you know, that we're human beings, that we're not just a number on a computer, mate.
The strikers claimed victory and resurfaced after dramatic events in state parliament yesterday when the combined opposition and independent votes pushed through a motion for an inquiry into the government's planned closure of Newvale and the winding down of Awabba State mine, costing 200 jobs. While that inquiry is being held, Newvale is expected to stay open.
Because of the commitment of these 9 men in particular and the support group of their mates on the surface and their mates throughout the coal mining industry, united they stood and united they won.
Now that the inquiry will be held, these miners are hopeful that what will also be brought to the daylight are the reasons why the government wants to close the New Vale Colliery and nearby Awabba. The union is confident that those findings will reveal that the reasons for the cutbacks are political and not economic.
We'll be able to lay our claims, and we believe substantiate our claims that what has happened should not have happened and should never happen again in the future.
The New Vale miners will return to work on Tuesday. For today, those involved in the historic sit-in were happy enough to bask in the sunshine and the love of their families. For more than a century, this grand old building was the classroom for thousands of hearing-impaired children. Now it will be the St Catherine of Siena nursing home for 50 aged people. Neighbouring the tradition of this building is a brand new complex, the St Martin de Torres hostel, with room for 40 residents. The hostel and nursing home have been completed with about $3 million of federal and state government money and the rest from resident contributions. And today the Minister for the Aged, Peter Staples, unveiled to the public what 90 elderly people now call home. With the number of aged people in Australia increasing, Mr Staples says the hostel and nursing home are sorely needed.
More and more people are requiring more extensive home care as well as hostel accommodation. That's why most of the money is actually going to providing hostels such as St Martin's.
In May, 10-year-old Paul Walker underwent a bionic ear implant, moving his world from one of silence to that of sounds. Paul's and his family's emotional journey was captured in the words of Jane Anderson and cameraman David Trilfo's vision for a news special called Silence Broken, televised in September. The documentary was nominated for the Best Suburban, Country or Rural Report in the prestigious Walkley Awards for Journalism. At a gala presentation in Sydney last night, Jane was announced as the category winner, receiving her trophy from Prime Minister Paul Keating.
"80-year-old Ada Collins lived alone in this house in Galgaba Street, Swansea. She was last seen alive on Saturday, but this afternoon, when her son came to visit, her body was found in a bedroom of the house. Detectives say the elderly woman had bruising to her face, but this may have been consistent with a fall. However, a back door of the house showed signs of having been forced and a fly screen was dislodged from a window. Detectives now want to establish the exact cause of the woman's death to decide if the circumstances are suspicious. Nothing in the house, including money, had been disturbed. At this stage, the direction of police inquiries will be determined by the outcome of the post-mortem. The results of that are expected to be known tomorrow afternoon. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
The Newcastle detective, credited with leading some of the area's most high-profile murder investigations, remains at the helm of operations while allegations of corruption reign thick and fast around him. Lance Chaffey continues to deny the assertions of criminal informer Ned Smith that he supplied guns and information to an armed hold-up gang. Detective Sergeant Chaffey insists the claims are the fabrication of a criminal, adding that every dog will have its day. The ICAC inquiry will continue throughout the month, its recommendations not expected until the new year. Meanwhile, there are a few fresh leads in investigations into the strangling murder of 80-year-old Ada Collins in her Swansea home at the weekend. Police have spent today comparing the accounts of those they've interviewed with what has been learned from neighbours about Mrs Collins' last movements. Andrew Lobb reporting, NBN News.
Motoring History provided the setting for the inaugural Achievement in Automotive Safety Award. The Australian Motor Museum hosted the ceremony, which brought together wide-ranging interests in road safety. More than 40 entries were whittled down by the judging panel to 6 final contenders, including NBN's Drive Alive series, ranked alongside such innovations as anti-lock braking and side impact intrusion bars. The panel, which included leading safety researcher Dr Michael Henderson, commended Drive Alive for a common-sense approach to road safety. Volvo, long associated with safety design, took out the award with an imaginative child safety seat incorporated into the rear seat armrest of the new 850 model. The seat suits children from 3 to 10 years. The General Manager of Windscreens O'Brien, Mr Stan Robinson, said his company planned for the award to continue to focus more attention on all aspects of vehicle safety. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
A full meeting by more than 100 members of the Dorrigo Guy Fawkes branch of the Farmers Federation passed a resolution supporting the introduction of a goods and services tax. Just over a month ago, a minority group had voted to oppose the tax, signalling to the government a possible chink in what is otherwise a united rural front. The Senior Vice President of the National Farmers Federation, John Crosby, also voiced support for the Coalition's Fight Back package, saying it would aid export industries, including those in the rural sector, with tax rebates. Transport costs could also drop by about 20%. While branches are encouraged to reassess their stand on government policy, the meeting resolved to channel any further differences through district councils.
Doug Robson, Ross Hawke, Dave Ballard, Steve McKenzie and Adam Smith from the Cronulla Club, and known collectively as the Wind and Sea Bodyboarders, joined 75 enthusiasts to learn about sea safety as well as improving their skills.
With the clinic, it's just not a straight go to the beach thing. It's the type of thing whereby they do learn, number one, to be aware of the sea, number two, how to surf that little bit better and have that added edge, and that's why we brought the team up from Cronulla.
With one young surfer lost recently, the clinic hopes to raise the awareness of the perils plus the delights of the ocean. Overnight leader Robert Emond of the Kingston Heath Club in Melbourne had a day he would rather forget, shooting a 4 over par round of 76 to squander a one-shot lead and fall 7 shots off the pace. Matthew King is also on 221 after firing a 73 today, but he is also in with a chance tomorrow. Tony Collier from Ballarat has been a model of consistency all week, and another subpar round of 71 sees him trail the leader by only 4 shots with 18 holes to play, and he's right in the thick of the action. 2 shots adrift of the lead is David Podlick, who was right in the groove today with a 2 under 70 to go with yesterday's fine 71. But the man they have to catch is Queensland's Rod Pampling. A stroke behind Emond overnight, Pampling ripped the Newcastle layout apart to be 4 under for the day. He leads by 2 shots going into the final 18 holes tomorrow. 79 boats from all over Australia are competing for 5 New South Wales State Catamaran Championships on Lake Macquarie this weekend. The 2HD GIO Regatta is one of the biggest cat titles in the state, and although today's first race was sailed in fluky conditions, competitors and officials were happy with proceedings. Steve Bruin from Rathmines leads the charge in the 14 square division, while Chris Russell from the home club had a good win in the NACRA 5.8 race. Jeff Adams and Scott Crichton had comfortable heat wins in the A-class and Taipan divisions, and B&D Kelly of Sydney lead the Stingray class.
During the summer months, we had so many disabled people down here, and they just stood and looked at the water. They were unable to get over the sand.
$11 to 4, 8 to 1 and 7 to 2, Flash Carrioy never in the hunt. In Melbourne at Caulfield, 4 scratchings also in the Hawthorn Football Club handicap over 1,100 metres. $13 to 2, 12 to 1 and 8 to 1, the unplaced favourite at 11 to 4, Loranto. Queensland fielded 2 teams in the interstate competition, and North Coast and the junior state team represented New South Wales. The Blues took all before them and proved too strong for all comers. They defeated Queensland 1, 22 sets to 11, Queensland 2 by 41 sets to 17, and had a struggle on their hands before overcoming North Coast 35-21. Coffs Harbour's Kimberly Bryan and Grafton's Kelly Blanche performed well, as did Jodie Lynn and Michelle Watson from the far North Coast. Two of the New South Wales Satellite Academy of Sports, Illawarra in the red and the North Coast in blue, fielded some of the finest netball talent in the state in a show of strength. Among the North Coast players, Kirsty Kukek, who has already gained representative honours with the state under-19 team. And today's battle befitted the seriousness with which sport administrators are devoting to the Academy of Sports. Played in 2 halves, neither side gave an inch in the nip and tuck affair, and the lead fluctuated throughout the first half. The North Coast just got their noses in front with time running out, and Illawarra was unable to bridge the gap. The Coast winning 14 goals to 13.
What a really nice girl. They're all lovely.
Can you see?
Thank you.
You've done well. Now, right up this year, received, ladies and gentlemen, a super package for two sponsored by the Beachcomber Resort. That's some prize, huh?
While the Australian wine industry has prospered in the domestic American and British markets, trade barriers with Europe have suppressed our export potential there. It's hoped the new agreement between Australia and the European community, struck after 4 years of negotiating, will change that. The benefits of easier access enormous.
The exports from this area to the rest of the world are about 40 million per annum. I would say by the turn of the century we'll be seeing that at the $100 million mark.
One of the major barriers to the European market has been a dislike by the Europeans of their regional names like Bordeaux and Burgundy being used on our wines.
Europeans who live in those regional areas are saying to us, well, we shouldn't be using their names because we're cheating.
Over the next few years, the use of European regional names like Champagne and Chablis to describe locally made wine will be phased out and replaced with names characteristic of Australia.
You might see Cessnock Semillon Chardonnay, so that by the use of the town or the regional name, the consumer will automatically know from where the grapes were grown.
There are still minor details of the agreement to be finalised, but Mr McGuigan believes freer trade could be in place early next year. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Less than 24 hours ago, these twins were the cause of much anxiety. 10 weeks before the due date, labour pains were the last thing 33-year-old Susan Rigby expected. But around 9 last night, the twins decided it was time. Susan and husband Paul left their Cooranbong home, headed for John Hunter Hospital.
I knew right from the start we left home, I thought we won't make it to the hospital.
So they called into the Cooranbong ambulance station and transferred to an ambulance for the trip to hospital. 13 minutes into the trip, Dad, a trained nurse turned doctor, delivering his daughter weighing just over 1,500 grams, or in the old scale, £3.7.
It's a feeling that's really hard to describe. I mean, it's just amazing. How do you describe watching the birth of your own baby? I mean, there was some tense moments there. I was really nervous and worried, but it's just such a magical, beautiful act.
With a second ambulance officer from Toronto now on the scene to help, a slightly heavier Daniel arrived some 20 minutes after his sister. Eventually, the Rigbys made it to hospital. Today, with time to catch their breath, had nothing but praise for hospital and ambulance staff.
The ambulance driver was very good. So if it wasn't for them, he would have been in a lot of trouble. You know, he would have had the babies in the front of the car.
Although Daniel has been named, a title for his sister is still the topic of conversation with the rest of the family.
On a mission to bring mankind and nature together, Class 2T, students from St Bridget's at Raymond Terrace. They nurtured 5 bass fish for 10 weeks before releasing them into the Williams River. It was an emotional moment, saying goodbye to their newfound friends.
We've been making our own worm farm and feeding them to the bass.
The students are taking part in a Department of Fisheries program to restock our rivers and at the same time learning how fish fit into the cycle of nature. Class 2T hopes to raise more fish and pupils are looking for new tanks to accommodate their project. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Now in its 14th year, the NBN Sports Star of the Year has built a reputation as one of the country's top awards evenings, recognising the tremendous wealth of talent throughout the viewing area. That area took a dramatic increase in size this year due to aggregation, and for the first time in January of this year, the sportsmen and women of the North Coast and the North West were honoured as well as those from the Newcastle, the Hunter Valley and the Central Coast areas. And tomorrow night in Coffs Harbour, 16 sports people representing 13 different sports will be presented with a semi-finalist medal. Some of those include Australian wave skiing champion Rhys Duncan, Olympic boxer Justin Rousell, and last year's overall winner of the NBN St George Sports Star of the Year, Chris Finder from Benora Point. Included in the awards night at Pelican Beach Resort will be the announcement of the Encouragement Award winner. The final night, a glittering live telecast, will be screened on January the 22nd.